Talk is produced by the Golden Bear Gazette, Mount Juliet High School student newspaper. Hi everyone, welcome back to Bear Talk. I'm your host Bella, and today Aryan will be interviewing Julie Draper from Drug-Free Wilco about drug abuse. On to you, Aryan.
Hi everyone, my name is Aryan Pandey and I'm a junior here at Mount Juliet High School. Substance abuse, which is the abuse of legal or illegal substances, is a growing problem in schools around the U.S. It can have a myriad of consequences for students who fall into it. A recent survey from the National Institute on Drug Abuse revealed that an estimated 4.4% of 12th graders reported misusing a prescription drug in the last 12 months. I'm actually going to be speaking with Ms. Draper, a prevention coordinator at Drug-Free Wilco. So, Ms. Draper, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Aryan. Thank you so much for having me.
Right, thank you so much. So, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and what your typical responsibilities are as a prevention coordinator at Drug-Free Wilco?
Absolutely, of course. Well, I am actually just a part-time coordinator. We have a full-time coordinator now, but I am a retired educator. I retired after 30 years of service about 2 years ago. And the reason that I did, I still loved education. I was an assistant principal at an elementary school. But I decided at 25 years I wanted to do something different while I was still young enough and excited and loved my community and wanted to give back. And this was just the perfect opportunity for me to actually do that. And Drug-Free Wilco, we're a community coalition of all different kinds of individuals, professionals, blue collar, just whatever you want to put together with agencies, community help that come together to work to just prevent and educate when it comes to substance misuse and abuse. And for my responsibilities, primarily, it's about, there's so many things that I do, but basically I help broker resources. I help unite different groups and individuals that can support people and help people overcome, whatever issues they might have, or to prevent whatever issues they might have.
Right, that's really good. My first question getting into this would be, how can you tell if someone's addicted to drugs, and what are some common physical and psychological signs to look for?
Well, you probably, when you think about just what it looks like physically, you've probably seen those typical things that you're going to know. I'm not clinically trained, of course, but we know when you see that slurred speech or someone's incoherent, or, of course, the smell of alcohol or marijuana on their breath or their clothing those are going to be big red flags. And of course, none of these things by themselves indicates that someone has an addiction or even a problem necessarily. But when you put these things together, like burned fingertips or marks on their arm, having way too much energy or being too fatigued, or they're afraid for no reason, or unexplained tremors, shaking, things like that, of course. But one of the things that you might notice is if someone's hygiene changes and they have poor hygiene, that's going to be an indication of a problem, especially compared with some of these other things. And then, in addition to that, if people have difficulty making decisions, or concentrating, maintaining focus, or just blacking out, or having trouble remembering just simple things, you're going to be like, hey, what's happening to my friend, or what's happening to my loved one? Short-term memory problems, trouble following simple directions. So all of those things, if you just start to notice things like that, then, individuals that are struggling begin to have strained relationships because they're covering, for things that they don't want you to know. All of those things put together can be a big red flag. Not necessarily every single one, of course, but just you think about those things. And when someone changes in those kinds of ways, you need to start looking into it.
Right, so it's like a combination of multiple things.
Absolutely.
And I've heard some people say that for some drugs, if you try them once, you're addicted, and there's not much you can do at that point. Is there any truth to this claim? And in general, how quickly does one become addicted to substances?
Well, that really varies on the chemical makeup of an individual, from what I understand, and it varies on the substance of their choice, too, as to whether or not they become addicted. For example, cocaine is highly addictive. It gets to the brain really quickly. It gives you excitement, euphoria. So the brain builds up a tolerance pretty quickly and craves more and more and more. So it's really easy to become addicted to cocaine. And people tend to use it to boost their energy or to even avoid dealing with anxiety or depression because of that exhilaration you can have from a high with cocaine. But then there's something more common and kind of an everyday substance like marijuana, which is not as quote-unquote addictive, but and a lot of people think that they're not dependent, but doctors and the people that study these type of things will tell you that marijuana may not be as addictive, but they call it a psychological or a situational addiction because individuals love the feeling that they have, either socially or just that mellow feeling, and so they do become dependent. And marijuana, of course, is considered a gateway drug. And not everyone that uses marijuana goes on to use illicit drugs, but almost everyone who uses illicit drugs has probably, been high with marijuana. So it's a gateway drug that leads to other things. Alcohol, of course. Some people wonder, well, alcohol has even got some nutritional value. So why is it, addictive? But it's because it reacts with the chemicals in your brain. And once that, changes and your brain craves it, it needs it just to function what you feel so that you will feel normal. Long-term abuse of alcohol is very detrimental. But like to answer your question more specifically, heroin, for example, there are plenty of cases of someone using heroin one time and then just, becoming addicted and just they go right back to it. But it basically depends on the substance and the individual and the chemical makeup of the individual and how they react to the chemical of the drug. So
I see. That's really interesting. So while addiction is a thing, you can also become dependent on substances.
Absolutely.
Yes. And, given that people can become dependent, in your experience from people you've seen, what are some of the reasons people get involved with drugs in the first place?
Well, and you probably heard this before, but no one ever experiences or has an interest in doing drugs the very first time with the plan to become addicted or to be controlled, I like to say, by an inanimate substance. But yes, my experience really would say that people get involved with drugs, and it starts with some really simple things like what your family's probably told you, peer pressure, just that social gratification, just wanting to be a part of the group and a good time, a thrill, but also trying to alleviate feelings of stress or grief, or even simple things like boredom. People are looking for something new, something different, and those are all really, reasons we can understand why someone might turn in a weak moment, to a substance to try to solve whatever or give them something that they want right then in the moment.
Right, I see. And in terms of contributors, actually another thing that I've heard is genetics. So do genetics and family play a role in getting a substance abuse addiction, or are they a factor? Absolutely.
There are definitely risk factors when it comes to misusing and abusing substances that lead to addiction based on genetics. Science is always evolving in this area, but there are some indicators that indicate that some people do have a genetic predisposition. Also, when you have prenatal exposure to alcohol, that's a big risk factor that it tends to lead someone to be prone to abuse alcohol or other substances. But then even just neurological predispositions where some people are just naturally neurologically have poor impulse control. And if you have poor impulse control, then you're not going to necessarily stop and make a good decision when you are stressed or grieving or whatever. You may just want that immediate relief. So that plays into it too. But science is evolving on that. So there's no real clear answer as to how much of a predisposition you might have, but they do have markers to indicate that that's the case.
Yes, and for individuals who do initially quit drugs, do you know the approximate proportion of individuals who initially quit drugs and go on to relapse later on?
I actually looked this up for you because yes, 85% of individuals that seek treatment tend to go back and relapse within the first year.
Wow.
And 2/3 of those do it within the first, few weeks after treatment. So that's a very sad statistic.
Right. No, that's a very large proportion of people. And would you know if there are any ways for this can be prevented?
Well, that's one of those ever-evolving things too when it comes to mental health and substance misuse, that it's always changing. But there do seem to be some strategies that clearly align with successful treatment lifestyles. First of all, health has to be the number one priority. You've got to be focused, and everyone, not just the individual. Of course, you won't buy in from the individual or you're not going to have success at all, but it's got to be about health. And an individual in recovery needs to be informed and then be able to make the choices that he or she needs to make to have that physical and emotional well-being. And I'm passionate about this. This is one of the reasons why I do what I do, because I believe that as a community, we're all better when everyone's healthy. And so we need to make sure that we do whatever we can with any agency, any doctors, lawmakers, business owners, bosses, supervisors, school personnel. Everyone needs to be working together to help us all have healthy lifestyles. And then from a more philosophical point of view, you need a purpose. And, one of the things that even though there are so many that relapse, the ones that don't, or the ones that relapse a few times but then stay true, it's because they have a sense of purpose. And we can even help cultivate that. When you don't see yourself as a victim or a survivor, but you see yourself victorious over your addiction, then you're going to want to help others. You're going to want to put that message out there on how to make that happen. And it's a very individual thing, but it's very motivating to me to see someone conquer something like this, and we can all be proud of it. And then, of course, a sense of home and community. Is where you're a part of something, which is another reason why I do what I do. We're all in this together. And the goal is to be resilient. And resilience is a learned skill, and you can become resilient at any age. Resilience just simply means, learning how to cope and deal with things when they're hard. And life's going to be hard. We were never promised that life's going to be anything different than that. So it's about knowing how to cope with those situations in a healthy way. And you can learn that. You can be 90 years old and learn to be resilient. So.
Yes, no, that's really interesting. Having like a sense of community and like, a sense of purpose. Those are things actually that I noticed are not very talked about. But like, I see like how you're describing it can be like, it can cascade into something bigger. So
absolutely.
Yes. Well, I mean, building off of that. So over the last 2 years, we've heard a lot about mental health challenges that have risen due to the COVID pandemic and less social interaction that results from that. So in your experience, would you like to comment on anything that you've seen over the last 2 years and like moving forward, what you think is going to happen?
Well, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know about that, but all of us, I think, our mental health, struggled a little bit with COVID, just with anxiety and fear and sadness and loneliness and the isolation, all of that. And surveys indicate that a big increase, of course, did happen during the pandemic. People tend to consume drugs, when they're depressed or anxious. I did look this up too. In the U.S., there was a 30% increase of overdose from 2020 compared to 2019. And then if you go for overdose deaths in the U.S., from 2020 to 2021, that was up 18%. So we're still feeling, the effects. We've got a lot to do. And we know our first responders, our healthcare workers, our policymakers, all of these people know, they're aware of this. In many ways, it's normalized misuse, which is not a good thing. That's very scary to me. But I can tell you from going to national conferences to represent Drug-Free Wilco, one of the things that I do have a lot of hope in is that when it comes to our community issues with this, it crosses party lines. It's not a divisive issue. Everyone, it doesn't matter on what side of the fence you're on when it comes to your politics or even religion, you're going to see people banding together. We've got to do something about this. And that gives me a lot of hope. Our vision for Drug-Free Wilco is a healthy, hopeful, engaged Wilson County. And I really do believe that if we keep our vision, that we will all unite, just like I was talking about that sense of community, to be healthy, that number one goal, with hope, and engaged with education. And we're not gonna, my husband has always said, we don't know what to do, but we'll do the best we know to do. And when we figure out that's not good enough or that's not right, we'll change it, and then we'll do what's good enough. And as long as we're doing that, of course, we can keep chipping away at it and, keep it at the top of the radar and all work together because it is about all of us. It's not about one. The other thing I would say in that regard is that because it normalized misuse, it did a lot to chip away at the stigma attached to substance misuse so that it can be out in the open and we can actually get help for people. So.
Yes, no, that's amazing. And, where can people find information about drug treatment programs, and what are some resources that you've recommended to addicted individuals in the past?
Well, the type of program that someone needs tends to, like we talked about how drugs affect people differently, tends to depend on exactly what the issue is. But there are so many resources online, of course, is the first, is what I tend to direct people toward. And usually it's people like you. It's not someone that's actually needing it for themselves. It's someone that comes to me and says, what do I do? Or an agency will come to me and say, where do I direct people? Right. And that's really what my job is. So we use our drugfreewilco.org website a lot. But then we get a lot of our state, the Tennessee Department of, with Tennessee Mental Health and Substance Abuse, they have an extensive amount of links for really just about anything that you can need help with. And I especially like that it's the same department for substance misuse is also mental health, right, because you can't separate the two. And they have all kinds. They have added on since COVID. They've added on staff and everything, and that's where we go to get our next steps. They stay current nationally with what the trends are and what people need. The one thing I would say is it's not a one size fits all. So. That's what you have to do is just kind of see exactly what the needs are and then go looking, and you're going to find all kinds of people out there that want to help. I don't know if that was kind of a vague answer, but
no, that was definitely specific. I mean, it can vary from person to person. Absolutely. So that definitely makes sense. So, I mean, my last question for today would be for listeners who might have friend or family member that they think have an addiction or abusive patterns towards drugs, what advice would you give to them for approaching this type of situation?
The first thing I would say, and this may seem obvious, but I don't think it is, just do something. Sometimes, when we were talking about those indicators that might represent a problem, I think we it's real common for us to put off reacting or doing something about it because we just don't want to, it's awkward and it seems judgmental. So do something, but instead of focusing on the problem, focus in exactly what you see or what you're observing. Focus on how much you love that person and their health. Like I said, make health be the priority, not the fear of confrontation. And then think about what you want to say ahead of time, even if you need to put it in writing because it's so awkward. And be prepared to offer ways to help. Like looking for helplines or going to the doctor with them. I recommend being really honest with the individual, but not accusatory, not making accusations and saying and using the words like addiction or addict, right, because you're not qualified usually to make that comment, but point out the behaviors that you're seeing that are off, the ways that your reasons for your concern, and try to avoid saying you need help, and maybe say something instead like, I was wondering if you'd consider going to the doctor and I'll go with you. Something like that. But as long as you communicate how important it is that you want to help and that you're doing your part. A philosophy I adopted years and years ago at this point is that you're not responsible for someone else, but we are all responsible to them. And so when you see a problem, you need to address it. And you may not have the answers, but do what you know to do and right, just be persistent, persistent with concern for the health.
Yes, no, that's really good advice. Like stepping in and doing something can be important. But overall, thank you so much for coming on here, Ms. Draper. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Aryan. It's been a delight. Thank you so much for the invitation.
If you haven't gotten a yearbook yet, you are going to want one. There are many things that you will remember about this year, and there are many things that make this year memorable.
As you make memories this year and celebrate life with friends, we encourage you to always remember by purchasing a 2023 yearbook.
Current prices are $95 plus tax. Please visit room B118 to get yours today. Buy a yearbook.
Make the most of it.
Remember all of it.
The Golden Leaf.
Welcome to Can You Dig It, the segment all about everything fashion and music. I'm Molly.
I'm Wren, and today we're going to be talking about our favorite TV shows, and Molly is going to start us off.
Yeah, but before we get started, I just want to say that I think this one is really going to show the difference between us because our shows are pretty much polar opposites.
Yeah, definitely.
But my favorite show at the moment is called Vikings, and when I tell you it is so good, normally I'm not a fan of period dramas, but my mom really liked the show, so I decided to watch it. It basically tells the story of Ragnar Lothbrok and all his sons in 8th century Scandinavia, and if it means anything to anybody listening, all of them are in fact extremely attractive, especially Bjorn, Ragnar, and Ubba. They're my favorites. It basically starts off following the story of how Ragnar and his people go on raids in northern Europe and the Mediterranean, and then moves into the saga of all his sons, which include Bjorn Ironside, Ubba, Ivar the Boneless, Vitzurg, and Sigurd Snake in the Eye.
These names are giving me a headache.
Yeah, they were
very
complicated. Yeah. But another one of my favorite parts is how the women are allowed to do basically everything that the men can do, which is super rare for the 8th century. They could own land, divorce their husbands, and they even fought with them. They were called shield maidens. They were super cool. It's written by Michael Hurst, who also wrote The Tudors, and it stars Travis Fimmel, who I love right now, Alexander Ludwig, Gustav Skarsgård, Catherine Winnick, Jordan Patrick Smith, and so many more. I definitely recommend it. It's brutal, dramatic, and intense, but it definitely keeps you on your toes and interested.
Moving on, my favorite show at the moment is Ted Lasso. My favorite show tends to change a lot, but this one's currently my favorite. It's on Apple TV, and the first season came out in 2020. The second season came out in 2021. And it's one of those shows that's really easy to rewatch, it's good. Basically, it's a comedy sports show about an American football coach, Ted Lasso, who is hired to manage a British soccer/football team. I don't want to get into the
Different
whole
footballs.
drama right now. When he gets there, everyone is mad and frustrated at this American coach who has no knowledge of the sport, but even though he knows nothing about it, Ted is encouraging, determined, and optimistic. Side note, even though it's a comedy sports show, you don't really have to know anything about sports or like sports to get it. I'm not a huge fan of sports, but obviously I love it.
I don't know about sports, my football roster is pretty impressive.
Right.
Right.
Right. Anyways, the cast is filled with many great actors/comedians like Jason Sudeikis, who plays Lasso, Brendan Hunt, Brett Goldstein, Hannah Waddingham, Juno Temple, and Phil Dunster, along with other amazing actors. The main reason I love this show is because while it's super funny, it can also be very emotional at times, and while I hate to admit it, I might have cried a little bit during it, because I can get emotional when it comes to TV shows, but that's kind of embarrassing, so...
That is embarrassing.
Stop. Overall, the show is amazing, and I highly recommend it to anyone who loves an easy rewatch, a comedy, and, sports.
Yeah.
That's all we have today for Can You Dig It? Next week, we will be talking about our favorite Christmas movies.
Before we drop our next episode, be sure to go to our Instagram and give us a follow at MJ_BearTalk. If you would like to hear us feature a topic or leave a news tip, drop it in our Dropbox outside B118. Here are a few notices before I catch you on our next episode.
Juniors begin registering next week during focus class. Freshmen and sophomores register in January.
The winter formal is on December 17th. Make sure you buy your tickets soon.
If you have song requests for the winter formal, fill out the Google form posted in grade-level Google Classrooms.
If you're interested in joining yearbooks, sign up on Skyward and fill out the application Google form in the grade-level Google Classroom.
And whatever you do, don't be naughty, because Miracle on 34th Street opens tonight. There are showings tomorrow, Saturday, and Sunday. Ho, 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 ho.
AP Music Theory has openings for the upcoming spring semester in second block. See your guidance counselor for more info and to register. That's all we have for you this week. Remember to love each other, MJ, and have
a very great day! Well, I'm a peanut bar, and I'm here to say you can't do it while you're talking. Try talking.